True transformation begins when we make the conscious choice to let go of the identity we have spent years building, the familiar self that has felt safe yet constraining, the version of ourselves that has been shaped by expectations, obligations, and the definitions others have placed upon us. Letting go of this known self requires immense courage because it means confronting the fear of losing the comfort of familiarity, the fear of stepping into a space where we are not yet defined, where our worth is not guaranteed by titles, achievements, or recognition. This process is not about abandoning who we are at the core, but about shedding the layers that no longer serve us, releasing the roles and labels that limit our growth and silence the full expression of who we might become. It is about acknowledging the parts of ourselves that we have held tightly, often to protect ourselves from judgment, disappointment, or failure, and daring to loosen that grip so we can explore the unknown with curiosity and openness. Letting go of the known self also means confronting the stories we have told ourselves about who we are, what we are capable of, and what we deserve, and choosing to question them instead of letting them define our possibilities. It invites us to embrace uncertainty as a necessary companion in growth, understanding that real change cannot happen while we cling to the familiar anchors of identity, because they tether us to patterns and habits that keep us small. This act of releasing is deeply intimate, often lonely, and always transformative because it demands that we step into a version of ourselves that is raw, unfinished, and deeply authentic. It requires trust in our own resilience and faith in the process of becoming, because we are entering a territory where we are not yet recognized, even by ourselves, and where the terrain is unpredictable and uncharted. Yet in this space of uncertainty, we discover the expansiveness of who we can be, the freedom to redefine ourselves beyond the constraints of past labels, external expectations, or self-imposed limitations. Every step away from the familiar is a declaration of courage, a commitment to our own growth, and an invitation to explore dimensions of our identity that have remained hidden under the weight of routine and expectation. By letting go of the known self, we open ourselves to the possibility of transformation that is radical and profound, a reinvention that aligns not with what others expect or have told us we are capable of, but with the deepest truths of our own hearts, the authenticity of our desires, and the strength that emerges when we embrace the uncertainty of becoming someone we have never fully imagined before. There is a rare and profound bravery that comes from the act of stepping away, from deliberately choosing to disappear from the expectations that have shaped our lives, from the voices that have told us who we should be, what we should achieve, and how we should behave, and instead daring to carve out a space where we can simply be. Courage in disappearance is not about retreating in fear or surrendering to avoidance. It is about actively making a choice to leave behind the familiar patterns, the routines, the habits, and the relationships that no longer serve the person we are becoming, even when doing so feels uncomfortable, uncertain, and lonely. It is about resisting the pull of the known, the safe, and the socially approved, and stepping into a liminal space where there are no guarantees, no maps, and no applause for what is unfolding quietly within us. This kind of courage demands that we confront the internal and external pressures that have long dictated our actions, the subtle expectations embedded in family, work, community, and even within our own self-image, and recognize that by continuing to meet them, we might be stifling the evolution of who we are meant to be. To disappear, to intentionally withdraw from these pressures, is to give ourselves permission to explore, to experiment, and to reimagine the boundaries of our own identity without the weight of judgment pressing down on every choice. There is a vulnerability inherent in this process because stepping away often means being misunderstood, criticized, or labeled as distant, ungrateful, or even reckless by those who cannot see the quiet work being done behind the scenes, the inner reshaping that occurs in the absence of external expectation. Yet it is precisely this vulnerability that makes the act of disappearance courageous, because it is easy to conform, to follow scripts handed to us by tradition, society, or fear. It is far more difficult to walk away from what is known, from what has been built around us, and to embrace the uncertainty of forging something entirely new. Courage in disappearance also requires patience and trust, because when we remove ourselves from the familiar, we enter a space where results are not immediate, where progress is internal and often invisible, and where the only validation comes from our own recognition of growth. This process is deeply transformative, because it allows us to disentangle our sense of worth from external measures, and to anchor it instead in the quiet, steady awareness of our own values, priorities, and aspirations. By choosing to disappear from old patterns and familiar spaces, we are also giving ourselves the freedom to notice what has been hidden by distraction, by habit, or by the constant feedback loops of expectation, the subtle joys, the untapped strengths, the desires and capacities that have been overshadowed by the need to perform or to please. It is a deliberate act of creation as much as it is an act of letting go, because in stepping away, we are making space for something entirely new to emerge, a self that is more aligned with our deepest truths rather than the identities imposed upon us. This act of disappearance is rarely linear. It involves missteps, doubt, and the occasional temptation to return to the comfort of the known. But each time we choose to persist, to remain in the space of uncertainty and potential, we cultivate resilience, clarity, and self-trust. Courage in disappearance is ultimately about embracing the paradox of invisibility and emergence. In order to become fully visible in the ways that matter most, we sometimes must first vanish from the places where we have been too defined, too confined, too familiar. It is a radical commitment to our own evolution, a testament to the idea that the bravest thing we can do is to honor the parts of ourselves that need room to grow without interference, and to trust that by stepping away, we are not abandoning life but rather giving it, and ourselves, the opportunity to expand in ways that would have been impossible while tethered to the expectations of others. In this courageous withdrawal, we discover the power of choice, the strength of authenticity, and the profound freedom that comes from recognizing that disappearance is not an end, but a necessary passage toward becoming someone who is not only unrecognizable to the world, but also unmistakably true to oneself, a version of ourselves that could never have emerged without the bravery to step away. Becoming unrecognizable is not about erasing who we are or discarding our past as if it never existed. It is about deliberately creating a space where we can step back, quiet the noise of external demands, and rebuild ourselves from a foundation that is rooted in our deepest values, our truest desires, and our most authentic intentions. Rebuilding from silence requires that we first embrace stillness, that we allow ourselves to withdraw from the constant movement, opinions, and expectations that have shaped our behaviors and decisions, and that we listen attentively to the subtle, often overlooked voice within us that speaks not in urgency but in clarity, revealing what truly matters. In this silence, we confront the accumulated weight of who we have been told we should be, the roles we have performed, and the compromises we have accepted in the name of safety, approval, or routine. And we begin the painstaking, courageous work of untangling ourselves from identities that no longer serve the person we are becoming. Rebuilding from silence is not an act of passivity. It is an active, intentional engagement with the raw materials of our own lives, where every thought, choice, and action becomes an opportunity to realign with values that resonate with our sense of purpose and integrity. It is a process of discernment, of examining the habits, relationships, and patterns that have shaped us, and asking whether they nurture our growth or limit it, and then having the honesty and courage to make changes, sometimes small, sometimes radical, that honor our evolving self. In this quiet reconstruction, we learn to trust our intuition, to honor the wisdom of our experiences without being enslaved by them, and to recognize that the person we are becoming is not a projection of someone else's vision of success or worth, but a reflection of our own internal compass, guiding us toward alignment, authenticity, and fulfillment. The silence itself becomes a powerful teacher, revealing the spaces where we have hidden our fears, insecurities, or unresolved pain, and giving us the clarity to integrate these experiences rather than allowing them to define or confine us. In rebuilding from silence, we cultivate resilience, patience, and self-compassion, because we learn that transformation is neither instant nor linear. It is iterative, demanding repetition, reflection, and the willingness to confront discomfort without turning away. Becoming unrecognizable in this sense is an act of creation as much as it is of deconstruction. We dismantle the frameworks, beliefs, and attachments that are misaligned with our core values, and then, with deliberate attention, we construct a life and a self that reflect who we truly are at our most honest, courageous, and expansive. It is a process that requires us to be fiercely present with ourselves, to sit with uncertainty, and to allow the unknown to become a space for possibility rather than fear. In the silence, we find the opportunity to imagine and inhabit a self that is not limited by past definitions, failures, or expectations. And we give ourselves permission to experiment, to evolve, and to grow in directions that feel deeply resonant and sustaining. Rebuilding from silence also teaches us the power of selective engagement, helping us discern where to invest our energy and attention and where to step back in order to preserve the integrity of our inner work. It allows us to become architects of our own transformation rather than passive participants in the narratives others have constructed for us. And in doing so, we reclaim agency, autonomy, and the freedom to define success, connection, and meaning on our own terms. The act of becoming unrecognizable through this process is a testament to our willingness to confront the unfamiliar parts of ourselves, to embrace vulnerability as a tool for growth, and to honor the profound truth that authenticity is cultivated not in noise or performance but in the quiet, deliberate choices that align our outer lives with our innermost values. It is in this careful, intentional rebuilding from silence that we discover a self that is not only transformed but also deeply anchored, a self that reflects courage, clarity, and the unshakable commitment to live in accordance with who we are at the very core of our being, allowing us to emerge unrecognizable not in the sense of losing ourselves, but in the sense of finally becoming fully, unmistakably, and powerfully who we were always meant to be. To change profoundly, we must step into the often uncomfortable terrain of vulnerability, a space where we allow ourselves to be seen not only in our strengths, but also in our imperfections, uncertainties, and fears, and to embrace the fact that being truly authentic comes with the risk of being misunderstood, judged, or even overlooked. Vulnerability is not a weakness. It is the essential pathway to deep transformation because it requires us to acknowledge the parts of ourselves we have hidden, denied, or protected, and to bring them into the light with courage and intention. When we confront the discomfort of being unseen, we are asking ourselves to trust that our worth is not contingent on recognition or approval, but on the integrity of showing up as who we are, fully and honestly, even when the outcome is uncertain. To move forward with authenticity while being vulnerable means leaning into the possibility of failure, rejection, or misinterpretation, understanding that these experiences are not a reflection of our value, but rather natural consequences of daring to be real in a world that often rewards conformity. Vulnerability invites us to examine the stories we tell ourselves about who we must be in order to be accepted, successful, or loved, and to challenge the automatic belief that our safety lies in perfection, predictability, or control. It asks us to open ourselves to discomfort without shrinking, to feel deeply without turning away, and to act courageously even when the stakes are high and the outcome uncertain. The power of vulnerability lies in its ability to dissolve the barriers between who we present to the world and who we truly are, enabling us to connect more meaningfully with our own experiences and with others, and to live in a way that aligns with our values rather than external expectations. By embracing vulnerability, we learn to hold our fear and our hope in the same space, to recognize that growth often comes through struggle rather than ease, and that authenticity is cultivated when we resist the urge to armor ourselves against uncertainty. In practice, this means leaning into discomfort, speaking truths that might be difficult to hear, making decisions that honor our inner compass rather than the comfort of approval, and daring to show our raw, unpolished selves in environments that may not be ready to receive them. Vulnerability requires patience and self-compassion because the process of being seen and misunderstood, of risking judgment and rejection, is not linear. It involves repeated acts of courage, reflection, and recalibration. Each time we confront the fear of exposure and choose authenticity over pretense, we strengthen our resilience, deepen our self-knowledge, and expand our capacity to engage with life fully. The transformative power of vulnerability also lies in its ability to create space for empathy, connection, and innovation, because when we are willing to be open and honest about our experiences, others are invited to do the same, generating an environment in which growth, trust, and creativity can flourish. To change profoundly through vulnerability is to accept that discomfort is not a signal to retreat, but a marker of engagement with the truth of our existence, a reminder that meaningful transformation is forged in the tension between fear and courage, uncertainty and possibility. It is through this tension that we discover the depth of our capacity to love, create, and lead with integrity, understanding that authenticity is not a destination but a continuous practice of showing up fully, embracing the unknown, and honoring the essence of who we are. Vulnerability teaches us that the most powerful version of ourselves emerges not in the absence of risk, but in our willingness to be exposed, to feel deeply, and to act in alignment with our values despite the discomfort of judgment or misunderstanding. By embracing this practice, we step into a life of courage, clarity, and profound self-discovery, realizing that the path to transformation is paved not with certainty or perfection, but with the bold, messy, and deeply human act of choosing to be real even when it is difficult, even when it is risky, and even when it requires standing alone. Transformation is not a moment, an event, or a sudden flip of identity. It is a process, a continuous, often nonlinear journey in which disappearance, the deliberate stepping away from old selves, familiar patterns, and limiting beliefs, is only the beginning of a deeper, more profound work of becoming. To transform is to engage fully in the rhythm of shedding what no longer serves us, confronting habits, assumptions, and roles that have long defined our behavior, and recognizing that growth requires the courage to release the comfort of familiarity, even when it feels destabilizing. This process is layered and cumulative, involving cycles of reflection, experimentation, failure, and renewal, each phase teaching us more about who we are and who we have the potential to become. In disappearing, we create the space necessary for learning, for understanding the gaps between who we are today and the version of ourselves that is capable of living with greater authenticity, clarity, and alignment with our values. The shedding of old patterns is rarely graceful. It is often messy, uncomfortable, and filled with moments of doubt. Yet each step away from the known self is a vital part of the scaffolding upon which we rebuild a stronger, more resilient, and more honest identity. Learning in this context is not only intellectual but deeply experiential. It comes from confronting our fears, observing the consequences of our choices, and recognizing the ways we have unconsciously limited ourselves in the past. It is in these moments of attentive reflection that we begin to reshape ourselves, integrating lessons that emerge from both struggle and success, cultivating self-awareness and aligning our actions with our inner compass rather than external expectations. Reshaping is not about perfection or creating a version of ourselves that meets societal approval. It is about intentionally crafting a life that resonates with our core values, one choice at a time, gradually transforming the small daily practices, decisions, and interactions into a coherent expression of the person we are becoming. Transformation as a process requires patience, humility, and persistence because it is not linear. Progress may feel invisible at times, and setbacks are not failures but invitations to recalibrate, deepen understanding, and reinforce commitment to growth. It is in the steady, sometimes imperceptible movement of letting go, experimenting, learning, and adjusting that real transformation takes place. A process that demands courage to face discomfort, uncertainty, and the vulnerability inherent in stepping into the unknown. This journey also teaches us to embrace impermanence, recognizing that identity is not fixed but fluid, constantly evolving as we gain insight, experience life, and deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. To emerge renewed is not to discard our history or deny our experiences, but to integrate them with intention, allowing the wisdom of our past to inform a self that is more authentic, resilient, and aligned with our deepest truths. Each cycle of disappearance, learning, and reshaping strengthens our capacity to navigate complexity, uncertainty, and change with grace and confidence, reinforcing the understanding that transformation is not an endpoint but a lifelong commitment to growth and self-discovery. In engaging fully with this process, we begin to inhabit a life that reflects our highest potential, one in which the courage to step away from the familiar, the discipline to learn from experience, and the creativity to reshape ourselves converge into a continuous unfolding of possibility. Transformation, understood in this way, is both an art and a practice, requiring mindful attention to the subtle shifts within ourselves, the willingness to confront our own resistance, and the persistence to honor the journey even when progress is slow or invisible. By committing to this ongoing process, we embrace a path of deep self-realization, one in which disappearance is not loss but preparation, learning is not passive but active, and reshaping is not artificial but emergent from the core of who we are. In the end, to transform is to participate fully in the alchemy of life, to allow the old to fall away so that the new can emerge, and to trust that through the continuous, deliberate practice of shedding, learning, and reshaping, we will inevitably arrive at a version of ourselves that is renewed, resilient, and unmistakably alive in the truth of our own becoming. Emerging authentically means stepping into the world as someone who is no longer defined by the expectations, judgments, or approval of others, someone who has moved beyond the compulsion to perform or conform, and has instead chosen to align every action, decision, and expression with the deepest truths of who they are. It requires the courage to reappear after periods of transformation, not as a reflection of what others want to see, but as a fully realized individual whose identity is grounded in self-awareness, integrity, and purpose. To emerge authentically is to honor the journey of becoming, recognizing that the shedding of old identities, the courage to disappear, and the labor of rebuilding oneself are all steps toward reclaiming the freedom to exist without compromise, without the need for validation, and without the weight of external expectations. This process demands vulnerability, because to present oneself in truth is to expose both strengths and weaknesses, victories and failures, hopes and fears, knowing that the reception of others may be mixed, indifferent, or even critical, yet choosing to move forward anyway. Authentic emergence also involves discernment, understanding which parts of the past serve as wisdom to carry forward, and which patterns, beliefs, or influences need to be left behind, so that the self that reappears is not a collection of fragments imposed by circumstance, but an integrated, cohesive presence that embodies clarity, confidence, and courage. It is a declaration of self-possession, a commitment to living in alignment with inner values rather than external pressures, and a refusal to shrink in order to fit into preconceived molds or to meet others' expectations. To emerge authentically is to embrace the paradox of being fully visible while remaining centered in oneself, to recognize that true strength lies not in pleasing others or maintaining appearances, but in acting with integrity, speaking with honesty, and showing up in ways that are consistent with one's own principles. It is about trusting the process of transformation, honoring the periods of disappearance and rebuilding, and stepping into life with a renewed sense of agency, self-respect, and courage. Emerging authentically is ultimately a gift to ourselves and to the world, because it allows us to contribute, connect, and create from a place of wholeness, presence, and truth, reflecting the power and resilience that arise when we commit to living in accordance with who we really are. Unapologetically and without compromise,